Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Council's Audit and Ethics Committee meeting tonight. My name is Paul Dudfield and I am the chairman of this meeting. This meeting is being web streamed to the public and is being attended by members through Microsoft Teams. Before we begin working through the agenda, I will go through some rules on procedure. The web streaming of this meeting is being monitored by IT services. If at any point there are any streaming issues, then I will be informed and the meeting will be adjourned until such time that the technological issues can be resolved. If during the course of the meeting any member of the committee is having connection issues, then there will be a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes to determine whether the connection issues can be resolved. If, following the adjournment, the connection issues cannot be resolved, then providing the meeting remains quorate, then it will continue. It will be deemed that the member with connection issues has left the meeting and will no longer be able to participate. For all attendees, please switch off your microphones and cameras. For members of the committee, your microphones and cameras should be switched off unless you are speaking. If you wish to speak during the meeting, please use the raise hand function and wait for me to ask you to speak. The voting during virtual meetings will use the raise hand function. I will call on the Democratic Services Officer to confirm the vote. Are there any questions before we move into the formal agenda? Okay, I will now ask our Democratic Services Officer to confirm the attendees at this meeting. This will be for members of the committee only. When your name is called out, please confirm your attendance.
Thank you, Chair. Going alphabetically, I will start with Councillor Cranham.
Present.
Thank you. Chair Paul Dudfield.
Present.
Thank you. Vice Chair John Eaves.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor McQueen.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Mistry.
Present, Monica.
Thank you. Councillor Pacey-Day. Councillor, you muted.
Present.
Thank you. That concludes the membership, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Okay, we will now move into the formal agenda. Thank you. So item number 1, to confirm the minutes of our meeting on the 7th of July 2020. Is everyone happy to confirm those as a correct record of the meeting?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pacey-Day, are you happy with the minutes? Yes. Okay, I believe that's everyone. Veronica, is that
That's
correct?
unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item number 2, to receive any apologies for absence from the meeting.
There are no apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Item number 3, do any members of the committee have any declarations of interest to make in respect of A, non-pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors? Item B, pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors? Or item C, notice under Section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax? Okay, no declarations made there, thank you. Okay, item 4 on the agenda, approval of the accounts for 2019-20. This was an item to follow that you should have received. John Illingworth, could I ask you to introduce this for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, sorry, everyone. So this is the report for the approval of the accounts for 2019-20, and there are 3 recommendations on the report. The first being that the statement of the accounts, Appendix A, be approved. The second, the audit findings report for 2019-20, Appendix B, be considered, and then the management representation letter for 19-20 be considered. Chair, could I also ask that there's a 4th recommendation agreed tonight, and that a notice of the statement of accounts is made to the council at the next meeting, which follows on from prior year policy.
Okay, yes, I'm happy to accept that unless there's any objections.
Thank you. Also, in this virtual way of dealing with things, with what I'm proposing is that we have minuted this afternoon that both yourself, Chair, and myself as CFO have minuted that we accept that the use of our electronic signatures are used for the final version of the accounts to save having to have signatures, which is unfeasible to get in this way of working.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Veronica, is that acceptable?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, John, thank you.
And I suppose it's also worth noting that the signed version of the accounts will be provided to Grant Thornton, but we won't publish the version with the signatures on for I suppose data protection reasons, but we will keep it on record on site.
Okay.
Before handing over to Grant Thornton to present the audit findings report, I suppose I'll briefly summarise any differences between the draft version you had in July and the version we've got in front of us tonight. I suppose I can note that there are no material changes since the draft that was published in July. And in the audit findings report, page 23, there are some reported amendments, and you'll see as a committee they're largely presentational. We've also, as part of the process between draft and final version of the accounts, took the opportunity to review the tables and all our working papers. But again, it's to note that there's no changes to any of the totals in the documents or material changes. What I would also like to highlight as part of the session tonight is that although COVID-19 has had a material impact on the current year's financial circumstances for the council, as part of the 2019 accounts, has, in terms of the numbers in the accounts, it had very little implications due to the timing of the situation. But I think it is worth noting that the narrative statement at the start of the report and also the note 5 around the assumptions about the future do start to bring into play the impact that COVID-19 will have on our accounts in future years. And certainly I expect that we have more of an impact on the 2021 version of the accounts. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have now, but also happy to wait until Grant Thornton representations have had the opportunity to discuss the audit findings report with you all.
Okay, sorry, thank you, John. So I'd like to draw a line, if we can, between 1920 and the future. So in terms of 1920 and the accounts that we're looking at tonight, which John has just explained, haven't changed materially since the ones that we reviewed as a committee in July. Has anyone got any questions for John about the substance of those 1920 accounts? Okay, thank you. So there's no comments there. In terms of looking forwards, then, John, and I take your point about the COVID impact in 1920 was minimal, and that's set out in the narrative. And the narrative very clearly articulates that will be more significant going forwards, and I guess we realise that given the timing of late March and where we are now. So would it be possible? So I know there's lots of very good explanation in the narrative document, but I think as a committee, and I'll just ask the other members to agree if they agree with this. Sorry. So I think what I'd like to see at our next meeting is something about the future. So it's what's the financial position looking like 2021, and given that the settlement, I understand, is to be announced late November for the period beyond that, what that means for us in the future. So I think, Veronica, our next meeting is in January. So John, would that be an appropriate time to bring us something on current year financial performance and the future? Yes.
What I can say, Chair, we present a quarterly financial performance report to Cabinet. So we've just done one for Q2. And as part of the budget setting process, we will be presenting a draft medium-term financial plan to Cabinet in early January. So yes, the timing, I think the next meeting is late January. So yeah, that's perfectly, that's fine for us to do, and I'm happily produce that for you all.
Okay, thank you, John. John Eves.
Yes. Within that framework, I think it would be really useful. I'm sure it will come out of it, but to look at the objectives that the council has over the next sort of few years, and how the risks emanating from COVID might impact on the achievement of those objectives. If we could sort of wrap that around the financial figures as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. John, can you bear that in mind as well then, please?
Yes, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so no questions of detail on the 1920 account. So again, I appreciate I'm repeating myself. So John's explained that they haven't materially changed from the ones that we saw in July. We've asked for an update on the present financial position because lots of the narrative report clearly alludes to that and the difficulties in the future. Some of which are COVID related, some of which we knew were coming anyway in terms of business rates and so on. So if we're happy with that, we'll ask Grant and Jim then to talk us through the audit findings report, I think. Is that right?
So, Chair, it's Grant Patterson here. Yep. As I understand it, if we take you through that now, that will be fine by us. So,
okay. Great. Thank you, Grant.
So thank you, Chair. Yes, so for those benefits of people streaming on YouTube, my name is Grant Patterson. I'm the engagement lead for the audit, and I'm joined online tonight by Jim McLarnon, who's the audit manager. So I'll take you through the audit findings report, and Jim will chip in as need be in respect of where we are on outstanding work. So I'm going to take you to page 3 of our report, which I believe on the electronic packs is page 171 in agenda item 4. So I think just in summary, I suppose picking up in relation to, as you already heard around COVID and the pandemic, the audit actually started back in July. It's nearing completion now and has been completed remotely. I think from our perspective, I think the council team has avoided significant challenges through staff illness and, as we've said there, and lack of availability. We have experienced some of that on our team, and I think really what I'd like to say, I'd like to thank the council, John, and particularly the finance team for working flexibly with us in that period, and to confirm we do remain on course to meet the statutory reporting deadlines, which have been pushed out to the end of November this year as a result of the pandemic. When we last spoke to you back in July, we did mention that we'd altered our plan to pick up the response to COVID, and a new significant risk that comes through the findings report this year is a financial statements level risk around the pandemic. And whilst there is an element of that looks at the year-end valuation uncertainties, and I'll pick up on those a little bit later, primarily they were already covered by the significant risk we reported to you in our audit plan. And therefore, really what we're looking at, I suppose, in terms of risk was how the council had responded to the implications of the pandemic in preparing its financial statements and updating financial forecasts, etc. So I suppose moving on to the overarching audit findings, as I said, we have worked constructively with John and the finance team to manage this sort of unprecedented situation. As I said, it impacted the status of audit work is set out on page 3, as I've said before. We've not identified any matters to date that would impact upon the figures within the draft financial statements, as you've heard from John as your Chief Finance Officer, or anything that would require modification of our audit opinion. As was made reference before, Appendix B of our report, which I think is page 23 or page 191 of the electronic version, shows that the only adjustments that we've identified to date have been around disclosures and classifications, and management has confirmed that those have gone through this set of accounts. I think one thing to bring to your attention is one of the impacts of the pandemic has been around significant disruption to property markets and a significant reduction in sort of property transactions over the financial year end. And therefore, I think from an audit perspective, we call those observable inputs in jargon, I suppose. And there's also alongside that's increased when we're seeing sort of cost indices, increased uncertainties around that. As a result of that, the turmoil in the markets, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors issued guidance to its members that a valuation material uncertainty disclosure was likely to be required in their work. I think from my perspective, it's probably important to say that that doesn't invalidate their valuations, but the valuers, the independent valuers you've been using, have been highlighting as less certainty can be placed upon their valuations than normal. So as a council, you have reflected those uncertainty disclosures within your financial statements. And as from an auditing perspective, we would see that given that sort of the value of your land and buildings and council dwellings is around about 120 million, I think understanding that is fundamental to a reader, and therefore in relation to land and building, we're proposing what we would call an emphasis of matter paragraph in our audit opinion. Linked to that, but not directly related to the council, is as part of the audit of the Warwickshire Pension Fund, clearly which the council is a member, the auditor of Warwickshire Pension Fund, which I'm sure as members are related, it is actually me as the auditor of that fund. I've also highlighted emphasis matter in the pension fund's financial statements, and that's in relation because they have investments in pooled property investments, and the valuers of those have given similar material uncertainty disclosures. They're just over £200 million in total for the fund, and given your a share of that is around about 5%, therefore we sort of calculated that we reckon around about 4.5 million of those assets would effectively be earmarked as yours, which is material. So again, it is a sort of, we believe, fundamental for a reader to understand that in your net pension liability figure, there is a material uncertainty. So again, we've been talking to your finance team about disclosing that appropriately in accounts. Need to make clear that in both cases, that doesn't affect our opinion on our financial statements, giving a true and fair view of the council's financial position and its income and expenditure for the year. These paragraphs are added to indicate a matter which is disclosed appropriately in your accounts and which we consider is fundamental to a reader's understanding of the financial statements. So that's really the new element, I suppose, in our audited reports this year. And I think you should see that consistently across public sector audits overall. We've also, and I'll come on to a bit more detail, undertaken a value for money, a review of value for money arrangements, and that picks up on the chair's bit. It does focus on the arrangements in 1920, but there is an element of forward looking in that. But we have concluded the council has proper arrangements to secure economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in its use of resources. If I just briefly now take you through it, I suppose the main findings that are in the report in terms of looking at our audit plan, we didn't change our materiality as a respect of COVID. I've already covered our response to the pandemic. We did ask the council to give consideration. I think they have looked at disclosures in post-balance sheet events, i.e. things that have moved since the 1st of April and any significant events up to the point of publication. We've not noted any issues in respect of improper revenue recognition, and no issues specifically around management override of controls. On property, plant and equipment, our work is still in progress, and that's shown on the work that's outstanding on the file. We refer to this on pages 7 or 175 and 11, which is 179. We have received responses to our queries, so we are assessing those, and we're close to completing our detailed testing. We haven't identified any issues to date on that work that would impact upon our opinion. Our work also hasn't identified anything in respect of the net pension liability. I mean, probably if members do remember from last year, we had a lot of discussions last year around the McLeod judgment. MHCLG has now published proposals for restitution of that back in July. And there's a new case around Goodwin this year. I think just for your comfort, these are noted on page 8 and 176 of our report. They aren't material and not considered to be events that would require adjusting in the accounts, and therefore we're satisfied you don't have to do any additional disclosures this year. So overall, financial statements consistent with what you've heard already, unqualified opinion of financial statements, and no significant issues to bring to your attention. Would caveat that with, as I say, there is some elements of work to be completed. We have received evidence of creditors testing. We just need to review that. We have received answers, I think, to queries on PP&E. We're going through those, and we have actually received the HBAP module 5. So we're just finalising that. And I'm not anticipating it to come out of that work, therefore an unqualified opinion that is appropriate. I suppose then bringing on to, which I think picks on to the work to a certain extent, where the chair was coming from, I think, in terms of where are you in this year as well as looking back. I mean, looking back, we have reviewed the going concern of the authority as part of a going concern work and value for money work. You have set, a balanced budget for 2021. You have reacted proactively to the threat of COVID. And as we've heard earlier, you are doing quarterly reporting. Both Q1, I think Q2 is about to go to Cabinet, and you've committed to update your medium-term financial plan refreshing back in February. From our perspective, from a purely auditing perspective, you have strong cash and cash equivalents, liquid investments. Therefore, I think when we did a sensitivity analysis, the lowest it goes is 6 million, and as higher it goes is like 85 million. And therefore, overall, we're satisfied that from a going concern perspective, there aren't any issues for us as your auditors. That does link into value for money a little bit, because the key risk we identified under value for money was looking at financial sustainability. And as I noted, we are proposing an unqualified conclusion. I think picking up on our report in our report in detail, we have noted, and you are appropriate arrangement. You've identified savings looking forward into 21, 22, 22, 23. I think they're totaling almost like £3 million. But you are looking to move to a rolling 3-year budget, which should remove those shortfalls. And I think we are recognising, and I think it might be come out in the paper, that we are recognising 2021 will probably be a transitional year. I think as the pandemic has impacted upon management's ability to implement those plans as quickly as maybe they would have hoped. I think probably just to point out fees and charges. You actually as a council are slightly lower in terms of your reliance upon those than other councils, about 10% compared to maybe 25, 30% other councils. Whilst that might insulate you a little bit, you have, along with other councils, recognised loss of income to services. I think for yourselves, that was totaling about 1.2 million, I think, is anticipated in the current year. That will be offset by the government support funding, but it won't cover everything. Also, in that respect. So councils also, I think at a corporate level, you set up a risk register. You're, reporting in Q1 around the risks, and that's been updated in Q2. I think one thing we would say to keep an eye on, and certainly and keep a close management response on, is that risk profile. I think you've reported, I know that you've reported, that in your worst case scenario, if that all the worst case scenario falls, then that will have a significant hit on your reserves and your certainly corporate reserves, not your total reserves, and you'll need to look at how that would fall. Again, I think we'd have to stress our uncertainties. As you're saying, we don't know what the 1-year CSR is going to look like, and that's coming out shortly, and we don't know what the long-term support that government might bring in for the council. So overall, whilst we recognise that you're facing significant challenge, we are satisfied you have adequate arrangements to deliver value for money, a balanced budget for 2021. You've recognised the risk and work is underway to plan for 21-22. And you have also recognised the most significant risk to you, I think, going forward will be financial sustainability. We believe you'll have sufficient reserves to weather the adverse effects of the pandemic and future challenges for 2021 and certainly into 21-22. But we would recommend, that you and that management and members do keep focused on that, and if and keep necessarily looking at plans to focus any gaps as they appear. So overall, that's where we are in terms of unqualified opinions. I think the final pages do note fees and independence, and there is one on a page on there on fees. We're having conversations with the sector as a whole in terms of how long audits have taken for this year. I think, as you're saying, we started in July. We're still finishing November in relation to remote working. I think we're estimating it across the piece that costs, or our costs around about time taken, is 25 to 30% additional. And we may I think we will be looking for support for that, but we think that might end up being about a 15% fee variation on average across our sector. And after that, I know it's quite a long presentation, but I think this is probably one of the most important reports that we give to you, but happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Grant. That was very comprehensive. Any questions for Grant on the audit findings report?
No, Chair.
Okay, Grant, could I just thank you for that report. That was very comprehensive. So I think we recognise the material uncertainty comments, and I guess they're not unique to us, are they? I guess.
No, they are consistent. Well, I mean, I'm going to say, I mean, nationally we are looking at doing those as a firm, and I can certainly say consistently across, well, certainly 3 out of the 5 Warwickshire districts and the county, you will see similar disclosures in their accounts.
Okay. And the caveat, and I understand the caveat about you haven't quite finished stuff yet, but are we getting very close to finishing now?
Yeah, maybe I can bring Jim in there. I think we've had the information through. I think it's we're just working our way through it, and I'm not aware that we've identified anything from the responses we've had that would cause me concern. I think, Jim, do you have any specific comments on that?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, and thank you, Grant. I'd just add to that I think you pointed out, Grant, that the majority of those points which were included in the exec summary as outstanding matters, they were so at the time of writing, but the team at Rugby have been very good in terms of responding to those and providing us with the information. So we're making our way through them at the moment. There are a couple of points still to resolve on the property, plant and equipment valuations, but we've got good traction and good dialogue with the valuer and the internal finance team. So I don't foresee any issues there.
Okay, great, thank you, Grant and Jim. So in terms of time scale then, so I appreciate those comments. So my understanding is we have to have everything done and dusted by the end of November. So we don't think that's a problem as we sit here today?
I'm not foreseeing that. I mean, I'm hopeful, to be honest, Chair, without putting Jim and our team under pressure and maybe John, that we'll finish our audit work this week, hopefully, depending on what looking at that. I'm not envisaging that being a significant issue for us completing the audit, and I'm hopeful that if we can't sign or complete work this week, it will be done early next week. So, okay,
great. And in terms, Grant, the final thing for me was the fee. Then, so do you approach us about the fee, or do you approach PSAA about the fee, and then they come to us? I'm just unsure of the mechanics of how that works. So I appreciate it will have taken you extra time, so I'm not disputing that.
I think we, well, I can say, I think as a firm, we did approach PSA because we feel that it's not just a Grant Paunton challenge this year. I think you'll see all firms have taken longer. I think it's just under the terms of the contract. I think the PSA have a mechanism. So the mechanism is we have to come through you first, and then that goes on to PSAA. So I think that would be the mechanism that so I was speaking to John, and as I was speaking to other directors of finance. So I think, I think they did look into whether it could be a sort of generic, I suppose, national response. But I think under the terms of the PSA contract, the mechanism in place that we have to come through you, which will then go on to PSAA. So they will do that, I suppose, that moderation exercise that they do to ensure that they are satisfied around that. So the process will be through you and through John and through yourselves, and then on to PSAA to do their review, to make sure that they believe that any fee variations are commensurate with the work that's been undertaken.
Sure. Okay. No, appreciate that. Thank you. It's just clarification.
No, that's fine.
The mechanics of how it worked. Okay. Any other questions for Grant or Jim before we move on to the letter of representation? No. Okay. Thank you. John Illingworth, are you going to lead us on the representation letter?
Sorry, Chair, I'll just get the document up. Give me 2 seconds.
John, just while you're finding it, so it appeared pretty straightforward to me. I know they're very important statements that are in there, but it appeared pretty standard and familiar with what we've seen and signed off in previous years. I guess have there been any material changes to the representation letter given what's going on in the world at the moment?
It's a Grant passage. Do you want me to explain, John?
Please, Grant. Yes,
I've got everything. I just found it now.
Yeah. Okay. I think we have asked. Clearly, it's your letter to us as a management representation. Yes. The additional ones, I think, if you're looking, I think it's page 203, and it's examples XV and XV11. They're probably the new ones this year around COVID and the global pandemic. So I don't think there's anything, well, clearly you need to be comfortable with them because of your disclosures to me, but I think we're just asking, it's almost like a recognition that you understand the material uncertainty disclosure and the impact on the financial markets of that have impacted upon a level 2 pool property fund. So you're comfortable with that. So those are the only two bits I think that we've added in this year that is different from a normal year, to be honest.
Okay, thank you, Grant. So are committee members happy? So the substance of the representation letter is essentially the same as we've seen previously. That's not to say we shouldn't give it due regard, but Grant has just pointed out XV and the following paragraph. So are we content as a committee with that, to put our name to that representation letter?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
Okay, thank you,
Yes,
everyone. So if we go back to the recommendations, John, so we're asked to, let me just find it, we're asked to approve the statement of accounts, we're asked to consider the audit findings report, and we're asked to consider the management representation letter. And then you also asked us, I'm just trying to find my notes,
to get my notes as well, then put a notice to council. A notice of the statement of accounts is made to council at its next meeting at the towards the end of this month.
Okay, thank you.
And again, that just follows what we've done in previous years.
Okay. So Veronica, do I need to ask for a proposer and a seconder for each of those items, or can we do them collectively?
It can be done collectively, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay then, so collectively then, taking those four statements together, so the three that we have on the document and the fourth that John raised with us earlier, do we have someone who can propose that, please?
Yeah, Chair, I'll propose Ish Mishri.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mistry. Is someone happy to second that?
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Cranham, you had your hand up. Sorry, was that second in the vote?
Yeah, that was to second it, Chair.
Okay. Okay, so can you vote if we're happy to approve based on that proposal and second then, please, using the raise hand function? Okay, thank you, Veronica. I believe that's unanimous. Can you just confirm that?
Yes, it is, Chair.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Grant and Jim and John, can I thank you, you three, please, and obviously your collective teams. John, for all the effort of you and your finance team in bringing the accounts together in these difficult times, and you've had to work remotely as a team as well, and equally to Grant and Jim and your team for guiding us through this audit and getting us to the result that we've got. So that's thanks from this committee to you and you personally and your teams for getting us to this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So should we move on? So item 5 is the Treasury Management Report. John Illingworth, is this you to lead on this?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Let's get the report up. So yeah, there are two recommendations of this interim Treasury Management Report. One be the report noted, and then two, that the Treasury Management indicators, as shown in 1.6 of the report, are agreed. I'll just give a little introduction to this one. As part of our Treasury Management strategy, but also the Code of Practice for Treasury Management, we're required to provide a mid-year report on our Treasury Management function, which is this document in front of us. I suppose it's probably worth noting that we need to comply with 3 key principles. The first one being the effective management and control of the Treasury Management activities. Second one being effective Treasury Management and control of risk. And a third one being the pursuit of value for money. I won't go through the content of the report in detail, because there's quite a lot of detail around the economic position of the country and also rugby itself. But I'll draw your attention to the Treasury Management indicators in section 1.6, which is identifying that we're meeting all of the indicators we've set for ourselves at the start of the year. I think I'd also draw your attention to section 1.7 of the report, which is just giving a bit of information where the strategy itself has some information around providing loans to a subsidiary, and it's probably just worth bringing the committee's attention to the fact that in July and September, council approved the formation of Rugby Holdco for a housing development joint venture. So as part of that, there may be a requirement to lend to the company, but there's been no plan to do that yet. But actually what we will do as part of our treasury management strategy for 21-22, we'll make sure we're not, and any exposure is managed that way. I think similar to what we've talked about at the account, section 1.8 gives a very brief update on coronavirus, and I think Grant just alluded to it in the presentation on the accounts. From a cash perspective, that there are no significant issues as a result of coronavirus, given our investment balances. But I thought it's worth highlighting that what we have done to support the wider economy is we've agreed a loan under the coronavirus business loan interruption scheme. We've lent Coventry and Warwickshire Reinvestment Trust £250,000 to lend on to businesses in the borough. So yes, that's a 6-year loan which will be repaid to us over the forthcoming years. And I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have on the content of the report.
Okay, thank you, John. Any questions for John on the Treasury Management report? Okay, no questions. So thank you, John. When I just had one question, and it may well be in the document, and apologies if it is. So in terms of the reinvestment trust, the Coventry and Warwickshire Reinvestment Trust and the 6-year loan, when would the first repayment date be? We're scheduling it for March 21 will be the first when we start repaying the loan. Okay, and we don't anticipate any problems with that at the moment, as we no, because this scheme, the government is guaranteeing up to 80% of each loan. So I suppose from our perspective, the risk is 20% of that loan. But certainly there's no issues that we're aware of at the minute in terms of the repayment of that loan. Okay, thank you. And I note in section 1.6 that you pointed out, so that sets out that we're meeting the indicators that the committee previously agreed were the appropriate set of indicators for treasury management. That's correct. Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions then, so we're asked to note the report and agree the, let me just find it, sorry, agree the indicators. Yes, review the indicators and agree them. So is someone happy to propose those?
Yes, Chair, I'll do it again. Ish.
Okay, thank you, Ish. Sorry, John, you've got your hand up. Is that to propose the?
That was, yes, but I'll second it if you like.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Okay, Veronica, so can I ask that we vote then on that proposal by raising hands, please? Okay, Veronica, I believe that's unanimous.
It is, Chair.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, let's move on then to the next item, the annual fraud report. Chris Green, I'm guessing this is you.
Chris has left.
Yes, indeed, hasn't he?
Chris has left.
Let me try and get him back.
Okay. You just bear with me, everyone, then, while we try and get Chris back.
He's having some internet issues.
Okay, Veronica, what should we do then in this eventuality?
Right. Unfortunately, the items that we have are for him. So if we give him a couple of minutes, so it's usually up to 5 minutes, and if we can't get him back on, then we will need to defer the items and schedule a meeting in at a later date.
Okay, so should we sit tight then and wait to hear from you for a few minutes?
Yes, just give me a couple minutes.
Okay, apologies everyone, so if you can just bear with us while we try and get Chris back. Sorry, hi Chris, welcome back.
Sorry, everybody.
That's fine.
Are you ready for my agenda items?
Just bear with me, Chris. Is everyone back with us? Everyone happy that Chris continues?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you,
Yes.
Chris Green. Yes, happy for you to carry on. So we just moved to the annual fraud report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Chris Green. I'm the Corporate Assurance and Improvement Manager, and the annual fraud report, which can be found at pages 15 to 23 in the main agenda pack, is being presented here. The report sets out the internal audit work carried out in 2019-20 to support the Council's counter-fraud, bribery and corruption strategy, the outcomes of that work, as well as the work being carried out in 2020-21. Firstly, in terms of work carried out, fraud and theft risks and controls were reviewed as part of our internal audits of creditors, cash and bank, completeness of income and IT security. There was a substantial level of assurance in all those areas. We did highlight a lack of compliance with the purchase ordering process, and a no purchase order, no pay policy is now in place, with a hard line being taken. However, it is acknowledged that there will still be some cases where a purchase order wouldn't be appropriate, such as utilities, for example. We also completed 2 corporate investigations during the year, and we also provided fraud, bribery and corruption training sessions to a total of 6 departments. Furthermore, all office-based staff were asked to confirm that they read and confirm their understanding of the requirements of the Council's fraud response plan, and this included a multiple choice questionnaire. Secondly, in terms of outcomes, under the NFI, 982 matches were reviewed. There were no frauds found. There were 7 errors, which resulted in clawbacks of £2,213 for housing benefit and £2,734 for council tax reduction. Of the 2 internal investigations carried out, in one case there was no issue identified, and in the second case a management action was taken. Finally, in terms of work being carried out in the current year, we're focusing understandably on the mandatory and discretionary business grant schemes. A lot of work has been carried out on those areas, and we'll also be carrying out further work on the latest schemes as they're rolled out. We're also reviewing the risks and controls during our current payroll system audit, and an expenses audit will be completed in the next few months. And we're also continuing to participate in the National Fraud Initiative. The members are asked to consider and note this report, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chris. Can I, just before I open up, can I just ask, so in 2.3, you talk about the 57%, the increase to 57% where payments are linked to a purchase order, and you correctly explained that there will always be instances where a purchase order wouldn't be appropriate. How much of the 43% gap do you think that latter explanation accounts for? And I appreciate you won't necessarily know the answer, but is it half of it? Is it much of it? Is it a bit of it?
It's hard to give a specific answer, to be honest, Chair, and that's something I'd be happy to look into, but I would suggest it will be a large proportion of that outstanding amount, because we have so much of our expenditure is contracted, and internally I understand there is a review into what we do with that contracted expenditure, and it may be, and John may wish to add to this, it may be that we go down the route of open purchase orders, which would cover each year of said contracts.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask one more before I bring Councillor McQueen in? So in terms of the 2021 work, the specifically the work around the COVID grants, can you give us an indication of the value of money associated with those? And again, appreciate not necessarily exactly, but is it hundreds of thousands or is it millions?
It's millions, Chair. We've paid out just under £19 million so far, hence the internal audit resource on those areas. And I can confirm, although we don't have a final report on that as yet, but I can confirm that through our pre-processing checks, 8 applications for grants were thrown out, and that we've had 1 case of fraud so far.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Councillor McQueen, you did have your hand up and you took it down, but by all means come back in if you want to ask a question.
You pinned me to the post a little there. I was just going to ask about the COVID-19 fraud case that we'd had. I know that had been brought up in previous meetings, and it was being referred to the police, I believe. Is that still being processed at the moment?
Council, I'm due to give an update later on in the meeting on that, if that's okay.
Of course, yes. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McQueen. Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris on the annual report before we consider the recommendation? Okay, so we're asked to consider the report and note it. So is someone happy to propose that for us, please?
I'll propose that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pacerday. And Councillor Cranham, are you happy to second that?
I am, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so can we vote on that recommendation then, please? Okay, Veronica, I believe that's unanimous for that recommendation.
Yes, it is, Chair.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, let's move on then. So the next item on our agenda is the external validation. Let me just find it. Sorry, the external validation of the coronavirus health and safety risk assessment. Chris Green, is this over to you again, please?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Chair. This report can be found at pages 24 to 37 in the main agenda pack. And I'm presenting this report on behalf of the Safety and Resilience Manager who can't be with us today. The report provides assurance that the Council has implemented appropriate arrangements for managing COVID-19 risks in the workplace. Back in May, the government published guidance on working safely during the pandemic, and then in June, the Council produced its COVID secure policy, which set out its organisational arrangements and the corporate risk assessment. This included common safe working practices, safe service-specific risk assessments, and oversight by the Pandemic Tactical Response Group and the Safety and Resilience Team. Given the potential impacts on the Council should a significant workplace outbreak arise, we commissioned an external review and validation of the corporate risk assessment, and that work was completed in late July. And I'm pleased to say the full report is set out at Appendix A, and the conclusion was that the Council was a pass against all of the 38 areas assessed. Members are asked to consider and note this report, and happy to answer any questions as best I can.
Okay, thank you again, Chris. Councillor Mystery.
Thank you, Chair. One issue, we have what we call Health and Safety Committee on board. Nowhere in the report it says that whether this went through health and safety, because it's pointless having a committee which doesn't see this report that we are seeing it today. I don't know whether Chris got an answer to that.
Thanks, Councillor. I don't, in all honesty, know the answer to that, but I will follow up to establish whether the report has been shared with that committee, and if not, we'll find out why and make arrangements for it to be shared.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any other questions for Chris on the coronavirus external assessment? Okay, thank you, Chris. I appreciate you presenting on someone else's behalf, so thank you for that.
Chair, just follow up to that. There was a direction that the town hall will be, people will be working from home. I can be careful it's not shut, because it's operating. Looking at this report and all the caveat that is given, what percentage of people, not the manual work, because that's been carried on, I understand, from the work service unit, that people are working in the office? Because there is a difficulty, I must say people probably find if the whole of most of the people are working. First of all, how many people are actually alternately working in the town hall? If not, how does one communicate with the officers? Because if you go through the switchboard, if you're working from home, you're not getting that direct contact with the officers concerned.
Thanks, Councillor. What I can say is that if you were to call a member of staff and that member of staff isn't working at the town hall, then the phone call will automatically go through to a forwarded number. And of course, internally we're also using MS Teams, and we're currently exploring, or the council's currently exploring, an upgrade to MS Teams, so that phone calls will automatically go through to MS Teams. But you also mentioned numbers of people working in the office, and of course the message is work from home if you possibly can. But that said, we have a system in place so that everybody who enters the town hall, whether it be to pick something up or to actually work, is required to sign in when they enter the building and sign out when they leave the building. And those figures are monitored, and they're mentioned each week at the tactical group.
Just follow up to that, Chris. Okay, tell you why I say it. I called somebody this week, and the officer's not there. I mean, you know, the reception was pretty good anyway. He said, I'll send the message. When you get the message back to say the officer's been informed, working from home, it says it will come back within 10 days. Now, that kind of note covering to say you'll get to respond in 10 days, it's just mind-boggling. Can you see what I'm getting at? We shouldn't even be thinking. Have you seen the note? What it says when it goes out the officer, that it'll come back in 10 days, up to 10 days. That's not good enough.
Thanks. I think, can I suggest that that's a conversation that we have offline, and I can look into the specifics of the case that you're referring to, Councillor Mistry,
Okay.
Because naturally the expectation is that officers are fully contactable in the same way at home or elsewhere as they would be in the office. So I'll be happy to look into that case.
All right. Can you give me a call tomorrow, because Absolutely. I've got a couple of issues this week. I'm not been satisfied.
Okay, thank you. We'll have a separate conversation.
Okay, Chris, give me a call tomorrow and we can have a chat. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mistry, and thank you, Chris, for agreeing to look into that. Chris, sorry, there's just one final one from me. So there are a few recommendations in the report, and I appreciate your presenting it on somebody else's behalf, and I'm grateful of that. And I'll just ask the other committee members if they agree with this. Would it be appropriate for us to have a report back in January on progress against those recommendations? So I appreciate the report is positive overall. In fact, it's very positive, but there are a small number of recommendations in section 5, as I understand it.
Thanks, Chair, and I would completely concur with that suggestion. And when we move on to the next agenda item, members will see that there are a couple of overdue health and safety actions arising from previous internal audits, and there are some more actions falling due at the end of December. So my suggestion is, with the next meeting being in late January, that we invite the Safety and Resilience Manager along to the meeting to give a progress update.
Okay, no, thank you. Other committee members happy with that as an approach? I'll take silence as agreement.
Yes, certainly, Chair.
Yes,
Okay.
Chair.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, thank you, Chris, for presenting that for us. Okay, so we're asked to consider and note the report. So is someone happy to propose that?
Yeah, I will, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And someone happy to second that?
I will, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And on that basis, can we vote on the matter, please, on the recommendation? Okay, thank you, Veronica. I believe that's unanimous again.
It is, Chair.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, let's move on to our final item then, the internal audit report. Chris, back to you, Chris Green.
Thank you, Chair. This report can be found at pages 38 to 56 in the main agenda pack, and it sets out the progress towards delivering this year's internal audit plan, a service performance update, and proposed amendments to the programme of work. If I can turn firstly to the proposed amendments to the plan, these are set out on pages 41 and 42 of the main agenda pack. The committee as gatekeeper is required to approve any significant in-year changes. This year, even more important than ever, is that we're flexible and responsive to emerging risks and delivering work which adds the greatest value to the organisation. I've therefore got several amendments to propose. 3 audits are proposed for deferral to next year, and the reasons are set out in the report. And this is to accommodate 4 additional pieces of work. Firstly, assurance work in relation to the new self-isolation payments scheme. Secondly, consultancy work to support the Council in developing and implementing a new framework of information governance policies. Thirdly, data accuracy and completeness testing for the new housing management system. And finally, to support to help the Council in setting up a new dedicated policy area on the internet. In addition, I think that based on recent announcements, there'll be a need for some further grant assurance work over the coming months. Notwithstanding all of those amendments, delivery of the audit plan is on track, and the team have been able to work successfully remotely so far. One member of the team is expected to require approximately 6 weeks of sickness leave later in the year, and the impact of that has been assessed and can be minimised with workloads managed across the team. If the situation remains as is, then an adequate audit plan will be delivered, which meets the requirements of the public sector internal audit standards, although I'm sure members will understand and appreciate that this is a very fast-moving situation. Moving on to performance, I'll just like to highlight a few areas. Firstly, in terms of implementation of recommendations, 78.9% have been implemented by the agreed date and 94.9% overall, which in my opinion is good performance, represents good performance, particularly in these circumstances. Secondly, we have 2 overdue high-risk actions, as mentioned in the previous agenda item. Those relate to health and safety. COVID-19 has understandably had an impact on priorities this year. However, there are more health and safety actions falling due at the end of December, and as has just been agreed, the Safety and Resilience Manager will be invited to the next meeting to provide an update. Thirdly and finally, I'd like to just highlight on page 47 the reduction in the end-to-end time for audits, reduction of 51 days compared to the same time last year, and that's largely due to an increased focus on this measure and new arrangements for clearing reports with management. So members are asked to consider and note the report and to also approve the proposed amendments to the internal audit plan, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That's very clear. Can I just ask one? So I understand the amendments to the plan, and to me, and we'll ask for other comments. Obviously, they all seem sensible and totally appropriate. Have you got a plan? So you made a comment about as it stands today, there's no problem in completing the plan. So are you ahead of the game? I guess I'm asking. Have you got a list of other audits that will drop if one of your members of staff or relevant officers in the council aren't available, because of what's going on? So have you already given some thought to what would change next if that were required?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, I have. And I think the thing to stress is that of the plan that's before you in the progress update, there's 11 assignments in progress to varying degrees, and a lot of work has already been delivered against those assignments. But the way I would prioritise it would be to first and foremost drop some of the risk review work that's ongoing. That's obviously important, but it's a question of prioritisation, and we'd look to then refocus that on the first quarter of next year. We'd probably also defer the expenses audit. Again, it's needed. Of course, without such assurance work, there's the ongoing risk of fraud. But again, we'd look to move that into next year. I think there's also a fair chance that the CCTV audit, which is currently in the schedule for delivery before the end of this year, it might not be feasible and practical to undertake that review because someone would need to actually observe the cameras in action and look at signage, etc. So,
Chair, sorry, I dropped off. Go along with the report if that's the recommendation. Sorry about that.
It's all right, Councillor Mr. Widget. Chris is just talking us through some of the details still.
So to answer your question, Chair, yes is the short answer.
Okay, no, thank you. So, Chris, how is it working? So you said you've been able to do all the audits remotely. So there is nothing you haven't been able to do that you would have liked to do in terms, so notwithstanding the adjustments to the plan, in terms of the audits that you have done, you're able to do that remotely, and you're confident with the evidence that you're getting to support that and the outcomes of that or those audits.
Yes, I am, and there have been occasions where we've had to work around things. So, for example, the current payroll audit has resulted in one member of staff have to spend more time on scanning documents and sending them through to our auditor rather than perhaps doing that physically in the office environment. And what I'd also say, Chair, is that in relation to the audits that have been deferred, there is a risk in the sense that we're not carrying out those audits this year, and we're looking to move them into next year. And so it's assurance deferred and delayed and potentially unmitigated risks. But then equally, we're putting resources on the areas of highest risk here and now, and having paid out just shy of £19 million in grants, and having a new systems and processes set up for those. Really, it's about adding the greatest value and mitigating the most substantial risks this year.
Sure. Okay. No, thank you. So I'm a great believer that the only things internal audit should be looking at are the things that matter here and now. So the fact that we agreed a plan a while ago, things have changed significantly since then, haven't they? So the plan needs to be what the plan needs to be today, and I believe you're telling us that at the moment that's the case. So I think that's entirely appropriate.
I agree, Chair.
Okay, thank you. John Eaves, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Chair. First of all, I'd like to support the comments you've just made about the way the audit plan, has got to be adjusted according to current priorities, and think that that's very sensible. But my main point comes back to this running sore, really, of health and safety. It's been an issue for this committee now for years, and I don't think I'm exaggerating it when I say that. We've got 2 overdue recommendations, 8 more recommendations due is at the end of the year. I just wondered from Chris, how likely is it that the ones due at the end of the year and these 2 are going to be completed within time?
Thanks, John. In all honesty, I don't think it's very likely, and I think that's in large part due to a refocus of priorities during the pandemic. But obviously, the Safety and Resilience Manager will be invited to the next meeting, and I'm sure he'll elaborate much more. I am aware that there are current plans to procure a new safety and health and safety system, which would then manage a lot of the issues that have been highlighted by the audits. But exactly where we are in terms of procuring and implementing such a system, I don't know. I'll endeavour to find out, and as I say, I would hope that the committee will get a fuller and comprehensive update at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, John, and thank you, Chris. So I think it is important that the Safety and Resilience Manager does attend, notwithstanding the reason that we've already discussed. But John is right. John Eaves is right. We have raised concerns about the implementation of those health and safety recommendations now for quite some time, in truth. So I think we will want to push on that when they come and talk to us next time. So thank you.
Thanks, Chair. And just to say that I will ensure that the senior management team are aware of the committee's concerns.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions for Chris on his internal audit progress update to us tonight? John, you've got your hand up. Is that from before, or is that a new hand? No, thank you. Okay, so we're asked to consider and note the report and approve the proposed amendments to the plan. So is someone happy to propose those recommendations for us?
I'll propose them, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McQueen. Someone happy to second them?
I'll second them. Okay,
thank you, John. Okay, so on that basis, can we vote, please, for the recommendation?
Chair, I've got an issue. I dropped off. I also support the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mistry. Thank you.
Okay, I might go back into the other main one in a minute, the other item. All right, thank you.
I think Councillor McQueen and okay, thank you everyone. So on the basis of Councillor Mystery's vocal endorsement, Veronica, is that unanimous?
It is, Chair.
Okay, thank you everyone. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, so we're on to item 9 of the agenda now, and that's to the motion to exclude the public under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. So I'd ask that we consider passing the following resolution under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. The public be excluded from the meeting for the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of information defined in paragraphs 1, 2 and 3 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Is someone happy to propose that for us, please?
I'll propose that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cranham. Someone happy to second that for us?
Yes, I'll second that, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pacey-Day. Okay, so can we vote on that motion, please?
Chair, I move as well. Sorry about that, Ish.
Okay, so with Councillor Mystery's vocal endorsement, Veronica, I believe that's unanimous.
It is, Chair.
Okay, so could I ask IT to notify us when the live stream has ceased, please?